Nothing like spoilers. What's up, guys? I'm here, and here we're going to do a breakdown / discussion on the spoilers for chapter 265 Jujutsu Kaisen, which is known as, I don't know. I still know. I have all the translations of the chapter, but I didn't actually. Did I see the chapter's name anywhere in those translations? My lord, don't fail me now. What is this chapter called? Hold on. Let me see. This, golly, new art by Gege, full chap, Yuji and Sukuna. Gonna take a while to translate. Title That Day. Okay. We are going to review the spoilers for number 265 That Day for Jujutsu Kaisen. And this is an interesting one. At first, I wasn't sure if I was even going to do a long spoiler discussion, but I actually do want to, based on the rest of the translation that came out and some mistakes I made in the original spoiler video based on the rougher translations I was reading. So let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. Heading me, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, this chapter as a concept is interesting, at least from what the translations imply, mainly because we just, like, Yuji and his ability to reflect or inject or create or destroy memories and the connections that Yuji has with people has been very vague. Like, vague to the point where people started to theorize that Yuji's own innate technique was dealt or dealing with memories, and then Gege heard so much about it, which is so rare. I'd say it's pretty rare for the mangaka to hear theories surrounding their manga, but it became such a prevalent theory that Yuji's innate technique had something to actually do with memory that people spoke up enough about it, and then came to the ears of Gege Akutami, and Gege literally had to come out and say, no, not their curse technique, not a thing. Now, of course, Gege has just flat out lied in interviews before. Unless I'm mistaken, the whole Gojo telling Megami about Toji thing was just a lie. And there are a couple other things that Gege said in interviews that either are contradicted by the actual narrative later on, and that's fine. Notably, Gege can change how they feel about their story at all times. But now this chapter has sort of opened up the door, because this ability is somewhat similar to what Sukuna himself does. Notably, it's similar, but it's different enough in a way that it could either be argued as a mutation of the innate Sukuna ability or simply something all to Yuji's own. But based on how Sukuna talks about it and doesn't seem to acknowledge his own ability, at least in the translations I have throughout the entire chapter, it seems like this is just something Yuji do, because Yuji do. But if you'll remember, Sukuna has the ability to transcend into the afterlife, or at least dip his toes in there. This is for both sorcerers and humans. We see it with Jogo when he wanders into that void, that special realm where cursed spirits go to reincarnate, and he's like, yo, I mean, you were half decent, dog. In comparison to all the people I fought, you were low-key kind of strong, my G. I ain't gonna lie to you. And Jogo started crying, and we also saw it with Kashimo, where Kashimo got waffle ironed, and then Sukuna was like, hey, yo, it's good, G, you like the fit looking clean, don't it? Hey, BT Dubs, you mad greedy, though. Like, what you mean trying to understand people? You gotta also be the strongest. You can't have both, little bro. You can't have both. Now, step down a little bit. You were the strongest of your own time, but you lucky I wasn't born yet. You know what I'm talking about? So, like, Sukuna's shown the ability to, like, dive into the afterlife / curse realm / something like that. And notably, it wouldn't be the first time we've seen characters either A, bend the rules of reality, and or C, that I skipped B entirely, but A or B interact with something similar to the cursed realm. If you remember, Big Jaku apparently removed sorcerers, or non-sorcerers actually, from the Culling Games through walking a boundary between dream and reality, and apparently that space itself is a curse. So it's entirely likely that Yuji's ability to dive into this strange memory-esque place, inject memories into other people, or create memories that very specifically never existed, or in this case, reflect this to Sukuna in something that may or may not be his domain, as Yuji himself straight up admits. He doesn't know what this is either. He's just straight up wilding out too. It seems like this may be a cross combination of both Sukuna and Kenjaku's natural control, natural affinity, or understanding of cursed energy in the cursed realm. After all, Yuji is essentially a group project. Not in the same way that Ichigo's a group project, but kind of, sort of, in the way that the main villain and another major villain in a roundabout way, came together to make Yuji. Yuji is essentially the son of Sukuna and the son of Kenjaku. So them having some sort of subconscious control over memories, over connections, over places, over people, yeah, it seems legit, just based on what his parents are able to do. But still, it's intriguing. And notably, what this chapter does go out of its way to kind of pseudo-confirm, if I'd say just flat out confirm, at least according to translations, as they stroll through a city, Sukuna realizes what's happening with him. A rare phenomenon when Yuji connects with a sorcerer during a battle. Sukuna asks if this is Yuji's domain. Yuji says he wanted to talk with Sukuna for a bit. What is this? Is this really your domain? Shut up. I was desperate, so I don't even know what this is. I just want time to talk to you. Come on, let's talk for a bit. So, is this Yuji's domain? Doesn't really seem like it. Was Yuji's domain expansion a Hail Mary last chapter? Absolutely. I saw people saying that it wasn't, but like, y'all, he was clearly wilding out a little bit. So obviously, I do think that's neat. And the idea that this couldn't be Yuji's domain, that this is sort of just a place born of the connection between their souls, is simultaneously a blessing and a curse, in the sense that I actively would have been intrigued with seeing a battle between these two in their current forms. Yuji fully healed, fully fresh, with none of the weird gauntlet stuff in the real world, and Sukuna being back to his two-armed state. But at least by what the beginning of the very chapter implies, with Yuji not understanding where he is, Sukuna not understanding where they are, them not knowing this is Yuji's domain, or some sort of weird intertemporal space where the Kingdom Hearts, it's itching, it's trying to break out of me. But in Kingdom Hearts term, it'd be where sleep and death touch. But in reality, this is where dreams, in reality, curse, Yuji, magic, connection through sorcerers in battle. It's unique, it's strange, but I'll take it. Mainly because this chapter is a whole lot of yapping. But particularly, it's yapping I enjoy, because it gives us something that I realized that we didn't really get about Yuji. Because he just seems so simple, and it seemed like a lot of the biggest backstory stuff about Yuji was already revealed. Especially with the revelation of him just being Sukuna's kid and Kenjaku's kid. But we genuinely take the time out of this chapter to get real proper Yuji backstory. Like, who he was, where he lived, what that meant to him, the reflections of it. And I think that's really, really interesting. Notably, Yuji, once again, ironically enough, kind of like Sukuna, isn't truly the most complex of characters. In fact, he's actually kind of simple. But Yuji, like Sukuna, was a character mostly surrounded in mystery. And to see Yuji take this time with Sukuna, with the main antagonist, and just walk with him, talk with him, it's interesting. And not only that, it's interesting to see Sukuna, for a majority of this chapter, I'll admit, be so amicable. Once again, it does remind me of Sukuna's own moments of crossing into that plane, where he met Jogo. After boxing and brawling and tossing Jogo through buildings and calling him pathetic and all that, Sukuna, when having defeated Jogo, did take the time out of his day to actually praise Jogo, give him congratulations, and explain what he could do in the next life to actively become a threat worthy of Santo de Gojo. Not worthy of himself, of course, but worthy of Santo de Gojo, if you know what I'm talking about, reaching that same height, reaching that same level. He was willing to do that. Sukuna, when confronted with Kashimo, was willing to teach him in real life and in that afterlife point where he was willing to genuinely conversate with him and explain Kashimo's dilemma and how ultimately Kashimo's a greedy man. Sukuna is willing to teach and communicate and talk. But it's so interesting to see it here, even though half of it's likely because he's under duress, and the other is because Sukuna very clearly can become... he can have a little bit of animosity in this world, let's say, based on the end of the chapter. We see he starts to tweak out. He could have easily done that sooner. But I want to say this isn't even a form of pity. It's a form of Sukuna, like, maybe genuinely giving Yuji the chance. Because I think one of the biggest things about the Shinjuku Showdown that has been underlying the entire thing, especially ever since Yuji himself showed up, was the idea of Sukuna being impressed by everyone else but Yuji. In one way, shape, or form. Kashimo Hajime impressed him just on the fact that he was the strongest of an era and had a very unique ability in Mythical Phantom Beast Amber. Maki impressed Sukuna due to her physical prowess without any cursed energy. Yuta impressed Sukuna due to his great overwhelming strength, the Queen of Curses, and his copy ability. Todo impressed Sukuna by his sheer fortitude, mentality, and ability as a sorcerer. Higuruma Hiromi impressed Sukuna based on his innate technique and what it could offer Sukuna in the context of a battle, or what it could take away from Sukuna in the context of a battle, and how the executioner's blade could work, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Almost every single character that's shown up has had some sort of interest to Sukuna. Sukuna, while he may not have acknowledged all of them by name, and probably couldn't care less about half of them, he's at least in some way recognized them. And it's something he's very specifically gone out of his way to not do with Yuji. He's repeatedly, over and over and over again, said, why are you still here? What are you doing here? What is this brat going to do to me? And ultimately, I think Sukuna being put in this place, a place where he admits and he knows that this is only a place you can get to when Yuji actively connects with you as a sorcerer. I think this whole chapter is Sukuna humoring Yuji because Yuji's finally earned it in his eyes. He did what Sukuna never expected. Caught him in a domain expansion. Awoke to shrine. Awoke to blood manipulation, or got blood manipulation. And proved himself not equal to the King of Curses, far from it. You can read 264 and see how non-equal they are. But still, showing up and showing out enough that Sukuna actively acknowledges him to the point where he's willing to even entertain this. This world of dream, reality, and memory. This empty void, if you will. Sukuna's willing to acknowledge Yuji in it and have this conversation simply because Yuji's earned it. Which in a way, I like. Because once again, Sukuna as a character has definitely been under a microscope. Naturally, he's been the same guy we've been fighting for over a year now. And I've seen a lot of people, even some Sukuna fans, not all of them, but some Sukuna fans, I know personally, and I've seen in my comment section and other people's comment sections, I've seen a lot of people start to fall off the character because they're saying he's boring. He doesn't pull out any new techniques. He's always doing the same thing. He's always getting out of nonsense. He's the binding vow merchant. He's the plot armor man. This, that, and the third. But notably, I find myself more and more intrigued by the character despite, in my opinion, his innate simplicity. What Sukuna told us he lives by is exactly what he lives by. Whatever he wants to do, he'll do it. Whoever he wants to fight, he'll fight. Whoever he wants to slay, he'll slay. Whenever he wants to eat, he'll eat. That is Ryoan Sukuna. You break him down to his core fundamentals, and that's him. And ultimately, a big underlying current of the Shinjuku Showdown alongside Sukuna's own disregard of Yuji is the importance or the notoriety of Sukuna's respect. And few characters have gotten that. So to see Yuji Todori seemingly cross into that plane, even if it is, once again, forcefully, he's not giving Sukuna much of a choice here, locking him in this weird, timeless space of memory and delusion, but still, you see Sukuna humor Yuji for not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7, not 8, not 9, not 10, not 11, not 12, not 13, not 14, not 15, not 16, but about 17 pages before finally starting to tweak out against him towards the very end. That's really, really good. And it shows that deep down, Sukuna was always willing to acknowledge Yuji, as long as Yuji could force it upon him. Just like anyone else could force it upon him with their abilities. And I'll take that. But with that being the case, we start to go deep into Yuji backstory. As they go through an underground passage, Yuji starts narrating to Sukuna about his childhood. I don't want to read the translation verbatim, but essentially, Yuji's explaining his past, what he's seen, how he's been, who he is. And notably, a big thing that this chapter does in the recap of Yuji is humanize Yuji. Once again, he's been inhuman since the series started. It's a big point that I've talked about in other videos. It's one of my favorite parts about the character. Yuji's not normal in any way, shape, or form. Even before we knew his daddy was Kenjaku's, or no, his mama was Kenjaku, and his spiritual cursed energy daddy was Sukuna, and then his actual biological daddy was Sukuna's reincarnated half-twin from 1,000 years past. Before all that, Yuji has always been an anomaly, inhuman, something beyond our understanding in many ways, shapes, and forms. So to see the manga, and by proxy Yuji, explain his humanity actually begins to properly tether us to the character. He was a child who grew up in different thoughts with different places, a child who had to move due to his grandfather's work, a child who didn't understand or respect what was given to him, but now has begun to. Yuji Itadori is a person. And I think that humanization of Yuji Itadori is so pivotal because of what this chapter is building to. The building to Itadori's realization. Because, I'll admit, for a good chunk of the narrative, ever since the Mahito incident back in Shibuya, Yuji's viewed himself as something expendable. something that can go away at any moment, something that, if anything, needs to go away at some moment for the sake of saving the world. He's always been a person who, well, not always, but ever since the Shibuya incident, he's been a person who recognized himself less as a person, but more so as a cog. So, to see him acknowledge himself so plainly like this, and explain it to Sukuna, to sit down and, well, not sit down, they're walking around, but to genuinely extrapolate and explain to Sukuna how he feels, what he thinks, his past, his history, to give Sukuna the humanization, it's nice. Because it's something I wouldn't have expected from Yuji, especially a Yuji who, if anything, many others and myself believed, was super duper, ooper, juper deep into his cog mentality, where ultimately it didn't matter the man behind the person who was slaying threats to humanity, who was slaying curses, as long as the person existed. That's all they needed to do. Who cared who they were, who cared for Yuji. And we see that Yuji ultimately explains a little difference, something fundamental to he himself and to humanity as a whole, something that Sukuna doesn't necessarily seem to understand. As we see, Yuji keeps explaining himself, his past, whether it be a slime he lost, whether it be a swing he swung on where he got stuck, and Sukuna's just genuinely wondering, what's going on? Like, what are we doing here, little bro? Like, this is actually going insane. Why are you holding me hostage like this? But Yuji keeps going, and we see that ultimately these two do have a connection. They've been infused with each other for a long time. They are reflections of each other in many ways, biologically, spiritually, soul-wise, cursed energy-wise, everything. And it's no better made clear than how these two are similar yet different when Yuji offers Sukuna to catch some crawfish with him. He gives him the stick, and Sukuna snatches it away, ready to get to hunting, get to moving, get to grooving. And we see the difference. Sukuna wins their encounter by getting a bigger crawfish, but Yuji ultimately brings a rarer one. Sukuna, all about the scale, all about the size, all about the power. Yuji Todori, all about the specialization, the specificity, and the determination. The rarity versus the commonality, the specialty versus the size. That's basically what Yuji and Sukuna's whole dynamic has ever been about, even if Sukuna, for the longest time in the narrative, held a lot of specialization, and ultimately still does to this very day. But with that being the case, we see that the connection between these two is something ultimately not understandable. Because as Yuji continues to explain his connections, his past, his motions, his emotions, and how he felt about certain things, from how he loved horses, to the green grass, to everything, to even the ice cream, Sukuna's just left wondering what the point is. Is this a stalling tactic in the real world? Is something happening to Sukuna's body that he can't control? What is going on here? Humanization has never mattered to Sukuna. It doesn't. What humans have to offer has mattered to Sukuna, but ultimately one's experiences, while they do make up who you are, it doesn't matter to someone who's simply viewing you as the completed product. There have been many experiences in my own life who have forged me into the yapper I am today. Biologically, socially, interaction, like there's a bunch of things that culminate me, but in a similar vein to Sukuna, most wouldn't care. Just like most wouldn't care about anyone's backstory unless given a proper reason to. And Sukuna finds himself in that same boat. But even to a deeper degree than most, simply because he does not really see the value of knowing a person. He sees the value in what they can provide through their power, through their combat, through their abilities. And if someone cannot provide any of those things, then Sukuna, what's the point? But we see Yuji continues to explain and ends up dragging his unk on their little nephew unk day to do some archery. And we see Sukuna's just really, really good at it because he came from an era of archery. Meanwhile, Yuji, he's kind of trash, a little bit. He don't arch that much. That came out so wrong. But let me not make it. There's a follow-up joke right there, but I'm gonna push that bad boy back down. But with it being the case, Yuji explains that. Oh wait, no. I do like the idea that Sukuna is still engaging, even in menial tasks, from fishing for the crawfish to doing archery. The innate competition of Sukuna's soul, even with someone he views as inferior, since they've put him in this position, Sukuna's still willing to interact. I do think that's a very important underlying part of the chapter, but as we get further into it, we see that Sukuna gets explained to the past about Yuji, the idea of snow, the idea of how Yuji didn't understand it, and how ultimately this is once again compiling on what makes Yuji human. But Sukuna's like, dude, hey, get to the point already. And we see that Yuji says, okay, whatever. We can keep it pushing. And ultimately, I think you need to understand something, Sukuna. Once again, Yuji Tadori has always, well, I keep saying always, but since the Mahito incident, viewed himself as something almost set in stone. Almost a piece of destiny, if you will. Remember, fate, destiny, these concepts do exist within JJK and have acted on characters before. The Six Eyes has always showed up to stop Kenjaku. To the point where, even after slaughtering a baby of it, a Six Eyes user showed up out of nowhere and stopped him on the day of merging. And then he lost another one before, and he couldn't beat Satoru Gojo. The Six Eyes are naturally a part of fate. Kenjaku is naturally a part of fate. Tengen is naturally a part of fate. All these characters are decided by fate. And Yuji didn't know that, but ultimately he felt this sort of fatalism, where no matter what he tried to do, what he did, he believed that as long as he held Sukuna, lived a life where he could find himself surrounded by those who cared of him, he'd be complete. There would be nothing else left. He'd be happy. And ultimately that would fulfill him. But it's different now. Now, Yuji ultimately admits that before, while he viewed his life as merely a means to an end, a cog of existence, something to not necessarily be looked with much praise, more so a, if anything, drastic indifference, as no more than a tool, a scapegoat, if you will. Now he realizes something fundamentally important, that people are not simply their power. People are not simply what they can do. People are not simply their abilities that they have. No, people, himself included, which is the most important part, are more than that. People are art collages. People are a culmination. People are everything that they have to offer. And ultimately, with that being a case, all those experiences, all those memories, what you've learned to speak, what you've done, all of that culminates into who you are. And notably, look at the characters who've shown up to represent that for Yuji. His grandfather, the man who raised him. To Junpei, the first person that he couldn't save. To Nanami, a mentor that he could not protect. To Nobara, a friend who fell due to his own mortal enemy. To Choso, a brother who was once an enemy who sacrificed his very life. To Satoru Gojo, a man who sacrificed everything in an attempt to save the world. All these characters are here. All these characters are responsible for what Yuji is. But it's not just the good, it's also the bad. Mahito, Sukuna, all of them are responsible for the Yuji Tadori that stands before Ryoma and Sukuna today. Everyone's had that impact on him. But, once again, before I go down into further narrative analysis, the thing I do want to mention is... here's the thing, right? She could still be there, but like, nah. If this isn't the hardest of copium slaughterers, copium enders, then I don't know what is. But Nobara showing up along with the rest of the... like, literally everyone else on this list is also... yeah, Nobara's gone, y'all. I'm sorry for every single Nobara fan out there, but... I think the copium wasn't strong enough. You just couldn't gaslight Gege enough. But the reason I think this is so nice is because it's Yuji understanding that it's not just black and white, Pokemon. Because to a degree, while the complexity that Yuji embraced by being willing to do whatever it takes to fulfill his role as a cog is unique and interesting, it's why I like him so much, the understanding of the nuances of a person, the understanding that a person is a sum of experiences, not simply one experience reflected ad infinitum. The fact that Yuji recognizes that, can turn to Sukuna and acknowledge that, ultimately, despite of the many lives Sukuna has taken, he still understands humanity not that much at all, really. While Yuji start to understand humanity even more, the ideological battle of Gojo and Sukuna, not Gojo and Sukuna, but of Gojo, not even Gojo, of Sukuna and Yuji is laid bare. Where Yuji, now, after battling Sukuna, after experiencing more of life, after going through the mentality of a cog, and ironically enough, crazy enough, still fulfilling that role, it's still, and ultimately always has been, a story where, how do I put this in a way that makes actual real sense? The story of Yuji Tadori has been one of finding the meaning of human life in the long term. At first, he thought it was decided by a good death. Then, on top of the good death, he decided that it would be along with protecting the world from curses as long as he could. And then, on top of that, and almost not necessarily negating that, but at least re-altering it, was the ideals and the passion and the memories that have culminated into Yuji Tadori today. With that, he has found the value of human life. And ultimately, since he has found it, since in a way he has reached his enlightenment, his understanding, he's freed himself from the mentality of a cog, he's transcended that ever-cyclical cycle, he does something that, once again, most characters wouldn't be able to do, and I wouldn't say most characters would risk. He appeals to Sukuna. Actually, since Sukuna is such a big reason that he is the way he is, Yuji very specifically says, "It's not the problem of how you die. I just couldn't forgive those who act as if the value doesn't exist. Sukuna, I don't like you, but humans aren't tools, so it's not like our roles are determined from the beginning. Whether good or bad, you can't tell if either is truly human. I might be the one that's wrong. That's why I wanted to at least make sure you knew about the other people who you can't find value in besides yourself." But then, with Yuji offering this olive branch, with Yuji laying it out, with Yuji explaining the true meaning and the true value of human life, ultimately doing his darndest to extend that hand, to reach out to Ankuna, to finally get him to understand the difference between something that has value versus something that doesn't. Sukuna says, "I don't feel anything. Brat, I understand everything you're trying to say. And even after that, I don't feel anything. It's like how you accepted the decline of the city, saying, well, that's probably the case. So what? Huh. So I failed. Just as I thought." Sukuna, once again, has reached his own form of enlightenment. A enlightenment that is fundamentally opposed to Yuji's enlightenment. Where Yuji has accepted the idea that the world is not simply black and white, and what truly determines what a human is their ability to recognize, rationalize, and compartmentalize, and then become a culmination of their experiences, and the idea that that matters even to beings that are far, far beyond said human. Sukuna knows that. And I think it's always been implied that Sukuna has known that. That's why he teaches Kashimo the lesson. It's why he'll remember Satoru Gojo. It's why he was tutoring Higuruma Hiromi. Sukuna's always understood that the culmination of oneself is the summation of all your memories and the value that comes with. But since Sukuna naturally stands in direct opposition to Yuji, he acknowledges that. But it doesn't matter to him because he's the peak. Sukuna always stood at the top of the mountain, and he's always been looking down. So if he's always been looking down, why would he ever look forward to see what's wrong if nothing is wrong from the peak? If anything, by looking down, he may find an issue he may not be able to overcome. So, it's always better to look down. It's always better to hunt down. It's always better to not necessarily care about people outside of what they provide you and your own hedonistic pleasure to Sukuna, because that not only is simpler and makes more sense to Sukuna, but it allows for a sort of degradation of value, where Sukuna does not have to worry about the lives or the motivations or anything that others have to offer him. He is free in his own way, as Yuji is free in his own way. But ultimately, I'd say Sukuna, in a roundabout way, is technically still more free than Yuji. Yuji is bound by the concepts of humanity and the connections and the life they have and the memories that they serve and all of that, but Sukuna is unbounded. He is free of that. And that becomes the question. What chains are going to prove more effective? What chains are going to be valued higher in the end by the narrative? Are the chains that hold Yuji back from becoming the same transcendental monster that Sukuna is the proper chains to wear of your own free will? Or the chains that Sukuna has placed on him dangling above the rest of the mountain, for he can only look down in order to see others trying to climb up to him? Is all of that correct or false? Who's correct? Yuji, who believes in the value of people, versus Sukuna, who does not believe in the value of people. That balance between those two. JJK being a story about the balance of life itself and what it means is very interesting. And notably, seeing Sukuna disregard it all. Not care about it, not really acknowledge it, simply... Well, actually, no, that's the crazy thing. He acknowledges it, but not accepts it because it doesn't make him feel anything. In a roundabout way, it does make sense. Because people do have struggles in terms of identifying and connecting with people. People do have struggles empathizing and sympathizing. And that's regular people. Imagine being a being in Sukuna's perspective. A being who arguably was born different than the rest of humanity. Not in the sense that he was a little bit taller, not in the sense that he was a little bit stronger, not in the sense that he was a little bit faster, or the opposite of any of those things. No, he was born with twice the eyes. Born with twice the arms. Born with twice the mouths. Born to be the manifestation of a system laid bare. So, of course, he looks at anyone who wields the system as lesser, because they can never wield it as well as he can. So why should he care about what they are? Because ultimately, he never really was one of them. And seeing that comparison, seeing the prince that was born amongst man and raised amongst them in spite of his artificiality, versus the king who was raised amongst man and rose above men, yet was born presumably naturally, seeing these two clash ideologically, and seeing Sukuna disregard what would be Yuji's greatest understanding and development as a person, it makes sense, and it's tragic. Because we find out why Yuji took Sukuna on this walk and talk and background check and talking about horses and everything. We find out why. Yuji ultimately admits that, I really thought I could reach you. I really thought you wouldn't be alone. I really thought as long as I could get you here, as long as I could communicate with you, as long as I could find that we understood each other, eventually, it could work. So I failed, just as I thought. If I had to say, your cowardice is astounding. Was your anger and hatred towards me really only to that extent? Sukuna suddenly realizes something. Brat, could it be that you are pitying me? That you're trying to show me sympathy? The idea that Sukuna is alone, and that the loneliness has affected Sukuna in a way that he does not understand. And that is why he struggles to sympathize and empathize with others. That, right there, right in that moment, that is what makes Yuji pity Sukuna, and it's what, in general, makes Sukuna pitiable. Sukuna is a creature that relies on other creatures. He is. Specifically, he relies on other sorcerers. Heck, he's nameless. Remember, Ryuman Sukuna is just a title. It's not anything real or tangible. It's not even something to call his own. He's just the strongest. If he were to ever be surpassed, someone else will become Ryuman Sukuna. He's empty. He's pointless, in a sense. It's why I made a video talking about the idea that the battle between Satoru Gojo and Ryoma Sukuna isn't over, despite Gojo being dead for nearly a year at this point. It's because Sukuna's ideals die with him. Because his ideals are so face-focused and centered around himself. Meanwhile, the ideas of Satoru Gojo live far beyond him, and same way with the ideals of Yuji. And Yuji seeing the isolation, Sukuna standing at the peak of the mountain looking down, standing and hovering and gazing down upon everything, Yuji attempted to reach out a hand. He attempted to welcome Sukuna in the fold. He attempted to understand him. A flower looking towards its gardener, trying to see if it could get it to talk back. In a strange sense. Once again, going back with Gojo's analogy of being able to look at other people as flowers to tend and raise to, or to be a flower that is simply to be admired rather than understood. But Sukuna doesn't necessarily want that. In fact, he doesn't even like the concept of it. It's why he's so fundamentally insulted that Yuji could even think that he would be pitiable. What could be pitiable about being Sukuna? He's the mightiest. Not the mightiest in history, not the mightiest of the past, the mightiest ever. He is the pinnacle of creation, unbothered and untouched. Why would he be worthy or even want/need the pity of a man so much lesser than him? That's why he's insulted. And ultimately, I love it because I can see both sides. I can see Sukuna not caring and genuinely thinking that's okay, but I can also see Yuji understanding what we as people are. Humans, us as social creatures, seeing a man who's alone. Who's always been alone since his birth, and there was never anything he could do about it. So now that their souls are tied, now that they're interconnected, Yuji tried to reach out that hand. But Sukuna spanked it away. Once again, Sukuna is a one man with an unbreakable idea. An unbreakable ideal. Just like Yuji Itadori. And now it comes time for the conflict of these ideas. For the conflict of their meanings and views of the values of human life. Their conflict on every single level is laid bare. Yuji's eyes reawaken. His arms don't remutate, but it's clear that any sort of hope for a meaningful conclusion or a meaningful rap that could be resolved non-violently is likely gone. And he declares, "That's right, Sukuna. I have the ability to kill you. Release Fushiguro, and if you come back to me, I'll spare your life." And we see that Sukuna, insulted enough, when he finally decided to acknowledge Yuji, when he finally decided to lower himself, when Yuji finally put him in a situation where Sukuna had no choice but to sit there and take it, with Yuji reaching across a line, with Yuji insulting him deeply, by not only humoring the idea that he, Sukuna, Ryomen Sukuna, strongest character in the series, the king of curses, would not only be pitiable, but then would need to have to worry about the challenge of a boy who couldn't even touch him. He is the one offering a binding vow. He is the one giving ultimatums. He who is so much lesser than the king dares to try and make him bow. How could he? And that's why Sukuna declares, "It seems you having a severe misunderstanding. I won't settle for just slicing you into pieces, brat. I'll slaughter everyone right in front of your eyes. Everyone that you care about and hold value in." The final battle of these two has been set up. The conflict between the two has been revealed to be irreconcilable. There is nothing that these two can talk about anymore. It now becomes a battle of ideals that cannot be won through words, but through fists and action. And for that, I am excited to see what shall come next. Ultimately, I do want to see the translations for this chapter so I can more go in depth on Yuji's backstory. I do want to talk more about the characters who show up and those who don't show up in Yuji's who he learned from versus who he didn't. Once again, I do want some translations for that so I can see who's associated with what of each of the speech bubbles. Because once again, I kind of just have like all the translations laid out, and so I've been like scrolling and looking. So overall, there's definitely a bunch of stuff that I still need to further deep dive on, but I hope you guys enjoyed this longer spoiler discussion. I really like that Gege took a break from the action to really go into the fundamentals of these characters. Their ideologies, what they stand for, what they agree with, what they don't. All that is really, really nice. I don't know. It's the character work that I love the most of basically fiction. I'm not to say Jujutsu Kaisen. No, fiction. I love character work the most. And the character work between these two in particular is so fantastic that I'm excited to see how it ends. However, that's what I think. Please what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please do me a favor and leave pitiful fool. Pitiful as in you pity somebody and they're pitiful. Fool as in like the fool. F-O-L. No, Lord. F-O-O-L. Leave pitiful fool in the comment section down below. And thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that lonely case bell so you don't miss out on any videos I come to the channel. Also, I do happen to have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. And so now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. So those perks will include the live reaction to this very chapter, and free variations of all my videos. And if you come into a $5 Patreon and to a $5 member, you can order whatever video you want. Also, I do have a link to my Ko-Fi in the description down below where you can drop 5 beans for a short video, 25 beans for a long video, or any beans at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. Now, I'd like to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with a Pencil, writing off. I'd like to thank you to our $3 members, Zena, Greyhound, Astro, Eternal Flame, NMA, Real Rare, G Prosper, Red Wolf 4765, and Paris Arnold. I'd like to give another big ol' thank you to our $5 patrons, Sean, Sammy, Midnight Lord 21, Kevin Encarnacion, Josh Brown, and A+A. And I'd like to give a great big thank you to our $7 members, Autumn Mornings Lazo, Fine, and That Guy. And I'd like to give a great big thank you to our $10 members, Robbie Uchiha, Jay Warrior, and Akid's Void. And I'd like to give big, hefty, juicy thank yous to our $10 patrons, Panda Goat, Michael Williamson, Metal Solid Crisis, Joaquin Munoz, and Ideological. And I'd like to give the biggest, juiciest, meatiest, sloppiest, and heftiest thank you of them all to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.